This podcast provides a platform for our guests to share their experiences and inspire our listeners to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams. As you listen, we invite you to explore how these concepts apply to your own story. You know what to do. Be great and be grateful. We're mic'd up with Mike DeChocho. Hey guys, you're in for another treat here. My guest today, he is a creative, problem-solving, modern communicator with an affinity for strategic thinking and business growth. He's a content creator and innovator who has achieved exceptional business results by weaving storytelling throughout all communication efforts, providing stakeholders with meaningful and memorable connections. He's also the founder of The Best Why. Welcome to the show, Steve Nazarian.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
My man, I've been so excited for this episode because for anyone listening right now or watching, Steve and I reconnected about a month ago. Yep. We knew each other from about 3-4 years prior. We were both doing different things. We had different initiatives at the time, but there was a connection. I knew that our paths would somehow cross again, and he had tuned into the podcast, I believe is how it all kind of reconnected, right?
Yep.
And when I heard what you're doing with The Best Why, and I'd like to start there. It's thebestwhy.com, and that's WHY for anyone listening.
Correct.
And I'll have it up on the screen. Our paths not only weave, but our ways of thinking about business and sales are very similar. So I'd like you to share, enlighten us on what you mean when you say the best why.
Well, you know, and we say this in all of our material and some videos on the website, but I'll get right into it. There's lots of reasons why someone might choose to buy a product or a service or engage a particular company for what they have to offer. And you start to think of those reasons as very functional reasons, you know, price, value, features, competitive advantage, all that stuff that you would sort of think about from a sales and a marketing perspective. But these are all sort of factual bits. And as much as we'd like to think we are data-driven creatures, we really aren't. Humans tend to make short-term decisions on data, but long-term decisions on their feelings and their experiences. So the best why, as we've termed it, is the best reason why someone might purchase from you. And that sort of comes from, if you think about as a person, and I'm speaking to the audience right now, you all have products or brands that you're completely loyal to, right? For my wife, it's Heinz ketchup. For me, it's German automobiles. We've all got things that that just work for us. And no matter how much something costs relative to the competition, that's just the thing that works for us. And so the whole idea behind the best why is to help companies, no matter how big or small, develop those relationships with their customers so that they're choosing their product or service for the best reason why, as opposed to these very short-term data-driven reasons why.
Right. And what I love about that too is you talk about transforming regular customers, if you want to call it that, right, into enthusiastic influencers.
Right.
And that you do that because of the connection. If they're not connected and it's transactional, buying a cheeseburger because you're hungry, not because it was the one that came to your mind when you started salivating, thinking about lunch or, whatever it might be. That's kind of just a quick analogy that comes to the top of my head. But people choose a particular place to go eat, or they want the healthy option because there's a connection to their health or something that they're going through right now, right, and they wanted to transform. So, and here's a quote directly from your website I want to share. It's a story well told creates a company well loved. And you help companies tell better stories. Can you explain the synergy between understanding your why and storytelling?
Absolutely. As I said earlier about the facts of a particular product or service, those are just data points. Mm-hmm. What I help companies do is get back to, and a lot of my clients are older companies. I've got a client right now that's a 50-year-old company. I got a client right now that's a 101-year-old company. And what I'm helping them do is sort of get back to the reason why they existed in the first place. Companies have a tendency over time to sort of veer off why they started doing what they do, and to get back to the reason why they existed goes a long way to focusing them on the type of customer they should be working with and engaging with. And to do that, you've got to tell the stories of not only how you started and why you matter uh, to the marketplace, but why you matter to individual customers. And what's interesting is, you alluded earlier to people becoming enthusiastic disciples or supporters. Some of the best stories you can tell about why you matter to the marketplace come from those customers who are completely loyal to you. They will tell you why it is they won't hesitate to purchase your product or service versus the competition. I was speaking with, I was at an art gallery opening a few weeks ago, and a friend came to see something I was doing. Is actually a live storytelling performance at this opening, and a friend came and she brought a friend to hers, and the friend reaches her hands out and introduces herself and says, "What do you do?" So I started to explain it in the manner in which I've just explained to you about, we all have things that we love. And she's like, "Oh yeah." And she went on to talk about a particular brand of cosmetics. And she's like, "I know I can't afford it right now. I know that how much money I make doesn't line up with what this stuff costs, but I like how the products make me feel. And I like how the people there make me feel." And she said, "I drive 10 miles farther than someplace else to spend more money because I like how this company makes me feel. They understand my needs and they meet them over and over and over again. And if I ever have a problem with their product, they address that as well." So it's not even about perfection. It's about a relationship and a level of trust that the company is going to be able to continue to deliver that which you love and appreciate, but also that they're dedicated enough to you as a customer that they'd be able to address any shortcomings that might come along.
Love all of that, and to kind of make sure I'm reflecting back on your points. What I love about it is a great company. They're looking for great people, right? And that might sound super cliche, but what I mean is when someone's coming in to make a purchase, right? So the person presenting that product or service is an extension of the company.
No doubt.
So how that company you talked about, I wrote down the way, feelings and experiences, the way the company or product makes someone feel and the experiences they have are what's going to turn somebody into, I identified it as an enthusiastic influencer. So the people of a company are an extension of their why, right?
Absolutely.
Now, some companies, we're in 2020 now, and they may not even have a sales force. It could be all online sales. It could be a solopreneur with a service. So there's not always like this large sales team that I envision when I think about, the sales force reflecting the company mission and vision and the why. But I don't want to ramble on here, but my point being made is relationships are still so integral. And it's like, I do feel like maybe there's an art there that's starting to get taken a back seat. Do you agree?
No, absolutely. And I'll be honest. When I spent a couple of years doing content development, user interface design for a large bank, and it was a pretty soulless journey. Okay, I'm not a banker. I know that I didn't think I was, and I know for sure now that I'm not. And in the latter part of that contract, I started looking at other positions, and with a good chunk of experience in marketing, I was surprised to see that everybody is just digital, digital, digital. We need this digital. We need this platform, and you need to be able to get us do this lead gen and all this data analysis. And as much as I wanted to sort of dive in and understand that, and I do understand it, it's just not me. I'm about, as you said, the relationships and the connection. So in this realm that we're in of digital marketing, where we now know more about the customer than we've ever known in the sort of history of sales and marketing, right? We know where that customer is going to be and what their needs are going to be, and the time and the date and the place and their ability to pay. And we can drop our offer right there in front of them. And if we get it just at the right time, we know they're going to buy it. The problem with that is that they don't know who they bought it from, and they don't really care. So the good news is all of these digital tools allow us to not only do what I've just described, but they also allow us to get out in front of the customer and help them understand why we as a company matter. Now, you referred to the solo entrepreneur, the virtual store, maybe even something like an Amazon merchant where somebody's just reselling. How do we, extend the company's or the person's why into that experience? yeah, you don't have a large sales force that you can train in a particular story or a particular manner, but every single thing that the customer encounters can be infused with that. It's in the writing, it's in the imagery, it's in the return policies. If you go and buy something and you start reading it's like, oh, I'm pretty sure I want this, but what if it doesn't work, or what if it doesn't fit? What's the return policy? If the return policy is this sort of
Life insurance
boilerplate,
policy.
yeah, or basically it says, pretty much when you buy this from us, you own it, buddy. That is already starting a relationship in a bad way. So it's important to look at every single thing that touches the customer, whether it's written, whether it's a graphical, whether it's the user interface experience. And that goes a long way to developing those relationships. And sure, there's going to be different depths of relationships. If somebody's going in to buy a car and they come in 3 or 4 times with a couple of family members and spend time with the dealer and the service manager and the sales guy and all that, yeah, that's a greater depth of relationship. Or it's somebody just going online to buy a particular a thing of nail polish that their friend said, hey, go to this Amazon marketplace store and buy this thing of nail polish.
Mhm.
But if they have even the slightest bad experience there, the next time they're not going to remember who they bought it from. They're just going to look for it wherever they can find it.
Mm-hmm. It's something you mentioned, and to be clear, you're not a creative agency nor a PR agency.
Nope.
You specifically help businesses work better for every external resource. Elaborate on that as well.
Well, if you're a company and you work with an ad agency, you work with a creative agency, a marketing agency, a PR agency, whatever you want to call it, publicly traded companies that work with investor relation agencies and resources. These are entities that are between you and your audience. And it's important that you have solid guiding principles, documents, and resources for those intermediaries, so that they are, for lack of a better expression, preaching the same thing as you. I've been on the agency side of things. I've been on the client side of things. And I can tell you almost without fail, there's always a little bit of a disconnect between the company and the people trying to figure out the creative stuff. So one of the things that we do is we help the company establish ultimately what I refer to as their communications constitution. In our federal government, whenever there's a question of constitutionality, it goes up to the Supreme Court and they look at the Constitution, they make a decision. We want to give the businesses that we work with a reference that they can go up against. And that's not just the senior executives, that's everybody all the way down to every level who has an interface with a customer or interface with someone else who ultimately has an interface with the customer. We give them a guiding document that they can refer back to and say, okay, well, in this case, what are the words we use? What is the expression we use? What are our guiding principles? And then we create little one-page reference documents that go out to the creative agency, to the PR agency, marketing, investor relations, whatever. And the charge with this little one-pager is, before you call me with a question about which way you want to go or should go with one thing or another, look at this, because this is what we're about. These are the answers to most of those questions. And, the creative side of things will love this, because there's no longer this gray area. Well, maybe we could try this, maybe we could try that. They've basically been told, here are the parameters in which you can go get creative, but don't go outside of them, because this is who we are.
Right, and what we're talking about on the big picture here is communication. We're talking about it as a form of marketing. We're talking about communication as a form of relationships, connecting. We're talking about it, one of the things that you're great at is storytelling. That's a great form of communication. But a different kind of communication you just brought up is where there's multiple departments in most companies. And I've been hired, same thing, to create content, and as a creative, as a branding person brought in.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're sitting down and they don't know, the person I'm working with might not know why the logo looks a certain way or what the tagline was in 1901 when their great grandfather started a company. And starting a project without having clarity, right? Clarity in the messaging, understanding what we're doing can cause a little bit of a tension where the creative company comes up with all these things that we feel would be awesome. And based on what we're seeing, this is our solution. And their thought of the solution is way out here. Or the person tells us this is what they want to do. And then the person paying for the contract or who hired this person sees it differently. So what I'd like you to do, you just talked a little bit about it, but talk about clarity of messaging and how important that is.
Yeah.
And give us some tips on sharpening our messaging and branding.
Well, I'll start by talking about how communications. So if you think about communications, the sort of center of it being the marketing uh, epicenter of a company. Okay, let's just say there's a marketing director, maybe a VP of marketing. There's a handful of people that work under that person, and the traditional feeling is that that group sort of pushes information to the outside world. One of the things that we do is that we come in and we do a complete communications audit and gap analysis. We basically do, depending on the company, we do a 1 to 2 year look back and look at every single thing that they've sent out, both externally, and here's the key, internally. Typically, what they've done internally is almost nothing. So, I had a situation years ago. I was a sales and marketing director for a manufacturing company, and we had a customer who was also a vendor, and we only had the one. And one day I get an email from that customer / vendor, and he says, "I thought this was really interesting. Good job." And what he had attached was a newsletter that the head of purchasing had been sending out once a month for over a year to all of the vendors, and marketing knew nothing about it. Now, it wasn't too far afield and it wasn't doing any damage, but this is stuff that's leaving the building with our logo. And by the way, wrong logo, wrong aspect ratio, wrong colors, wrong formatting. I mean, there was a lot of things that obviously the procurement department is not going to be good at. But marketing didn't even know that this was going on because procurement went and didn't tell anybody. Now, I appreciate the initiative, keeping in touch with your vendors, great idea. But so one of the things we do after we do the audit, both externally and internally, is we ask to gather up all of the business goals for the company, and then we decide whether or not each of these communications is actually helping move those goals forward. But going backwards into the company, we make sure that everybody in the company, no matter what level, and I mean, I'm talking about the guy who sweeps the floor, needs to understand what it is the company does and why what they do matters. That's maybe not critical for the floor sweeper, but for the guy who's turning a wrench 40 hours a week and thinks of his job as, I tighten these 6 bolts on this thing as it goes by in the assembly line. If he understood what that component went into, and then that final product leaves the building, where it goes, and ultimately what it does, he's going to care a lot more about turning that wrench. And more importantly, especially in a manufacturing environment, continuous improvement or quality systems completely hang on whether or not people care about what they're doing. He sees a flaw in a casting. He sees a nut that doesn't look quite right. If he doesn't understand why what he does matters, he's not going to care. But if he understands that if that nut isn't tightened properly, that 16 steps down the way, someone who really needs that product to perform is going to be left wanting, then he's gonna care. So
great leadership is going to allow that person to know and understand how important they are, so they don't feel like a number. They're not walking and punching their card going, I'm just going to turn a wrench for 14 hours. They actually understand, like you just said, how much their importance. Nobody else can be great or deliver a great product or service without that integral piece. So they feel more part of the team. They're more connected. They have purpose. Purpose is a huge word in all of this, right?
Yep.
And I would go back to the floor sweeper too. He has purpose too. And it could be as simply as everyone feels great being in the office knowing it's clean. And that guy is the reason that everyone's feeling good. He can feel good making people feel good.
Well, the other thing that ends up helping too is, as you said, purpose is critical.
Appreciated.
Especially in the lower paying positions, companies tend to have a hard time holding on to people. Turnover is high in an hourly positions. So if that purpose, that person who, by the way, is in the office fewer hours a week than they're not in the office, and they're out in the world, and people ask, hey, what do you do? How do you spend your time? How do you make your money? Not only are they going to be able to say where they work, but they're going to be able to say why where they work matters. And, you see these ratings year after year, best places to work. Those companies who achieve those best places to work rankings are typically the ones that communicate internally better than the others.
Yeah. You see Wegmans on there quite a bit.
All the
You know,
time, year after year, top 5.
Yeah.
And you really can't over communicate. You know, if there's too much information, people will just start to ignore it. And they're like, yes, I know that. But if you hold back, the other thing that's interesting, and I've seen this before as well. I worked earlier in my career for another manufacturing company, and we had about 100 people in the office in marketing, sales, and engineering, and about 300 people in the factory. Some of the best ideas for sales and marketing came from the people in the factory, especially when we opened it up. We had a naming contest for a product, and we said, everybody, you would, some of the ideas were absolutely out there, but we named a whole new product line based on an idea that came from somebody in the assembly line, because they're living and breathing it, and they were ecstatic to be included in that.
Yeah, they had purpose. They were able to take their purpose, and they know what they're doing, and they wanted to actually see it as an end result and not just make a lug nut. They wanted to see what the car.
You know, going back to the word you said earlier, you can't have purpose without information.
Yeah. And here's the thing, talk about purpose. I do highlight a lot of not-for-profit organizations as much as I can on the show. I've had a few leaders in organizations on the show, like Del Reed, from 26 Shirts. I had Evelyn on, Evelyn Kessler, who's doing great things, and Olivia Larson. So shout out to the three of them. And also yourself. I know you work closely with not-for-profit. Got to make sure it's different than nonprofit. Those are two separate things. And so since launching Mic'd Up, I've really been in tune with what's going on in that not-for-profit world. Here's the thing. I love that you reach out to these organizations to help with their messaging. Can you give us a few examples of how it might look different for a not-for-profit organization than maybe a for-profit, or is it the same?
Well, I mean, the human piece of it's the same. The ability to get information in front of people in an actionable manner is the same, but the motivations are often different. I actually have a meeting this afternoon with an organization that I work with. They run tutoring programs in elementary schools, and they're having a little bit of a tutor retention issue. So I'm going to be working with them to improve their messaging, but it isn't just to how do we keep people from quitting. It's how do we understand why they're quitting and get out in front of those objections, not only up front and make sure that the impediments to staying sort of fall away, but we'll take it even farther up into the recruiting process. Or maybe they're recruiting the wrong kind of volunteers. They're the easy ones to get are the ones that stay a year. Maybe it's a little harder to get the ones that'll stay 5, but maybe it's only 20% harder with a 5 times return. So you really have to look at everything end to end. And in this case, value in terms of dollar value isn't the motivation. We're talking about getting at people's sense of duty. We're talking about making sure that they understand the societal value in what they do. This organization,
Big.
85% of the kids that get tutored by this organization that are behind achieve grade level or better math in 2 years. And all the statistics say that if you're at or above grade level by the time you go to middle school, your chances of success are hugely improved.
I think it's third grade, right? Third grade is the key year.
If
you're behind in third, you're going to probably be behind in 9th and 12th.
Correct. And that's where they start. They basically 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are who they tutor. And this catch up is huge, but it's expensive. I mean, the administration of the program is expensive. The space that they need to use in the schools costs money. The materials cost money. And their human piece is free functionally, but there's this administrative piece of gathering, holding on to, and serving those humans. So we carve out 20% of up to 20% of our time to helping, we'll just say, companies that don't have making money as their prime directive, whether it's a nonprofit organization or a not-for-profit entity, depending on the structure. But the other thing is that we learn a lot about human nature. We learn a lot about behavior, and we learn a lot of specific things in our work in the nonprofit space for use in the profit space. Every interaction with an organization that has a goal and a message and a mission gives us experience that we can use across the board in all of our customers.
Right, and a client avatar, which is something that I work with my clients a lot, is, hey, look, before we can get your great product or service, or even improve on that and get the
Yep.
messaging out to the world, number one thing you always need is attention, right? So you could have this amazing product or service, nobody knows about it, that's a problem, number one problem. Then you get attention, and it's like, okay, now you got to story tell, now you got to connect the dots, now you got to pull at the heartstrings. And a not-for-profit, that's the way that a lot of these companies do it, where, you know, it makes sense. You need to understand the story of why they're doing what they're doing. It all ties into what we're talking about. But whether it's not for profit or for profit, a client avatar is so important. And I want you to define some guided principles that, you know, our audience can benefit from. What does that mean to create a client avatar to you, and how
Yep.
do you implement it into the process?
Well, you know, there's three words that get sort of thrown around in this realm. Avatar is one of them. I tend to stay away from that one just because it conjures up, you know, blue people in movies. The other one is persona, which I also don't like, because personas, to be honest, a lot of the persona work I've seen done in corporations is there's a lot of ethnic components to it, and I don't see the need for that. Certainly in banking, most of the personas that we saw were, you know, here is Jose, and here is Tamika, and here is John, and they tended to follow along ethnic lines, which I don't think is necessary.
Mhm.
So I tend to look at them as customer profiles, and the profiles that we develop are really based on the data that the company has. We look at what we have on customers, and we sort of group them into logical buckets that make sense. And we say, okay, maybe it's geography based, maybe it's income based, maybe it's purchase pattern based. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at it, but we look at just the purchase behavior data, and then we sort of segment them into buckets. And then from there, we can then work our way back into the messaging. And sometimes, you know, there's 2 points I want to make here. Sometimes you don't need a different message for each audience. I have a client right now who, when we were talking about putting together some drip campaigns, they showed me the 15 audiences that they want to go after. And I said, yeah, that's true. They are different. And this is a fairly narrow market that this company operates in. They make lots of different versions of a single product for functionally one industry, but
Very
lots of different
specific.
people in that industry, you know, touch the product. And I said, look, we can look at these 15 users that you've identified, but I'm pretty sure we can pare this down to maybe 3 messages.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is that it isn't necessarily 3 very straightforward flat messages. These are rich messages. In this case, we're going to be doing some both some drip email, sort of formatted HTML rich email campaigns, and some videos. And in the videos, we can say you've got 4 channels in video. You've got what you see that is visual, what you see that is data, words on the screen, what you hear that is non-data driven, music, sounds, and then what you hear that is data driven, which is specific words. Those are 4 channels that you can shove information down at the exact same time, and all human beings can process all 4 of those channels at once.
Mhm.
And for the most part, people will latch onto the things that matter to them, and they will ignore the things that don't matter to them. So I can say out loud one thing, and I can put on the screen something else, and persona A or profile A is going to hear what I've aimed at their ears, and profile B is going to see what I've aimed at their eyes, and they're going to ignore the other one. So there's ways to take your production costs and your creative costs and sort of really concentrate your efforts and be able to hit multiple audiences at once.
That's,
The other,
I think anyone listening, go back and listen to that one more time. I just want to make sure I got the notes right. Video channels, there's 4 of them. Visual, then there's the data and text. There's the sounds, which is kind of the environment or what's going on in the video. And then there's the words, right? The
yep.
spoken word. I think that
Let's
I
say,
never
for
thought about
example, yeah,
thought about it that way. Where
the brain can process all 4. Let's say we're in a music realm, and I want to speak to both guitar players and bass players.
Mhm,
And if you've ever been around a band, you can say that those are very different people, right?
for sure.
So If you've ever listened to a Paul McCartney solo piece, it's always bass forward, right? You can always hear the bass line. So if I'm talking to both bass players and guitar players, let's say we're just talking about amplifiers, I can talk to the guitar player and say guitar things, but I can have a prominent bass line in the music. And the bass player is gonna be like, man, they are speaking my language. And the guitar player is like, this is all about me. When in fact, it's about both of them with a single video. I didn't have to shoot two things. So there's lots of ways to do that. And, any good video production company, or even just as we call a run and gun guy, like a guy with a decent camera and a copy of Final Cut, they should understand that. And if they don't, you can certainly say, hey, look, I want to say this in writing, and I want to say this in the sound, and I want to say this in visuals, and so on. One of the other things about audiences, and, I had a conversation with a potential new client the other day, and she's in a very specific, fairly narrow space, but in that space, it's a multi-level marketing situation where she has a lot of resources from the parent company. And I said, well, how many different customer types have they defined for you? She said, oh, there's so many. I'm just so overwhelmed. And I said, well, let's look at these customer types. Which ones do you relate to? Which ones feel the most like you? And she's like, oh, maybe 5 or 6 of them. I said, only sell to those people. Concentrate on the people you can most closely relate to, and don't worry about the other ones. I posted something on LinkedIn about this the other day that basically says opportunity, things that look like opportunity are sometimes distractions. And I saw a thing this morning that actually had it distilled into a single line, which was, startups never starve, they typically drown.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's okay to take a step back and say, look, there's enough opportunity here with these things that I understand. I'm not going to worry about the things I don't understand until I've locked down and really connected with the people that I do understand. And once that is established and is generating regular revenue, then you have the opportunity to sort of venture off into areas that you don't understand. And maybe that's through hiring someone who understands this other area, or bringing a consultant in. But it's okay to ignore potential. And I saw someone else that said, spreading yourself too thin only assures failure in more markets. So, it's okay once you've defined all of these, whether they're avatars or personas or customer profiles, it's okay to define them all and say, okay, there's 6. We're going to concentrate on these 3 because that's all.
I wish I would have called you 2.5 years ago when I was starting my company too, because, that last piece of information may be to me the most valuable that I've heard on the show. And I mean that out of respect for everybody on the show so far. But I think a lot of times, look, entrepreneurs are in go, 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 and we're looking big picture, and we know what our superpowers are, and we want to make a difference in the world. And at least that's my core. And I found myself going down a couple directions that derailed me from my main purpose and goals when I started out in not too long ago, November of 17. Things that were presented to me that looked like they'd be something I can add into what I'm doing to boost me up, right? And then it ends up kind of getting me off track. And then the main goal, I'm being very transparent here. The main goal can start to get blurry because it's like water the garden, right? The grass is always greener, water the garden. So I think that's great for anybody to hear. It doesn't matter if you're a financial planner listening, an author, a CEO somewhere, starting your company up today because you're hearing this and you're inspired. I think that's so important. So say that just one more time clear. Make sure you focus on those 3, like you said, 5 different client profiles.
Well, it also comes back to the connection we were talking about earlier. Okay. I'm 51 years old. I have 4 teenage kids. I'm married and I run my own company. Okay. I'm going to have a lot harder time connecting with, a single mom who works 3rd shift in a factory. Not because I can't understand where she's coming from, but because if I get into a connection situation with her, she looks at me and says, this guy doesn't understand me. He doesn't go through what I'm going through. He's in a totally different situation. So, recapping as you asked me to, once you've taken the time to define your customer profiles, avatars, whatever you want to call them, lay them all out and pick the ones that are most in line with who you are as a person, who you are as a company, who you think you can most easily connect with, and concentrate on those first.
Yeah.
Once, they'll create your first round of loyal customers.
Hmm.
And then, don't lose sight of the other ones. And, some of them might come along anyway, but, put them all up on a board and say, look, who can we go after now? And it's, I don't like this term of low hanging fruit, because it sounds like the stuff that's almost a little bit rotten is about to fall to the ground on its own and nobody wants it. But I like to think of it more as, a lion out in Africa could chase every single thing it sees, but it only goes after the things it has the greatest success of catching. So it
Or
doesn't just
also a
run out into the
substantial
field.
meal too, right?
Yeah,
It's a substantial meal for its family. They're not going after a chicken or
right.
whatever.
It
Prioritized
could
animal
grab
work.
a meerkat or whatever
Yeah,
easily.
yeah, yeah.
It's only going to buy in 10 minutes. Yeah, but they look out onto the savannah and like, okay, we got a herd of these over here and a herd of those over there, and he could just run out and just start running every different direction. He's not going to catch. He's going to go after everything and catch nothing. So they stay along the sides and they figure out, and they do their calculation. They figure out what's going to be the most successful and sustain them the longest. And that's what they go after. And maybe years later, when the pride has grown and they've got multiple hunters together, okay, you're going to go after the antelope, and you're going to go after the impalas, and you can do that then. But when you're starting out, and every company has finite resources. That's the thing you gotta remember. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much money in the budget. So you've got to sort of bring all that together and decide, okay, what makes the most sense for us to go after, and what can we win at today that will allow us to survive until tomorrow?
Yeah, the key word is focus, 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 right? And you're on point, on purpose, on brand. All the things we're talking about is focused, and the opportunity, or I don't want to use that word here, the chance, or even let's just say, if you're a betting person, right? You're going to bet on the person who's prepared, focused, like on time, prepared, like everything that we just talked about,
Right.
put into a ball that has more chance of success than someone just running around winging it.
Well, and those relationships that you're
Mhm.
trying to build, those connections you're trying to build with those customers, let's just say you're talking to 10 customers a day. If half of those customers are the same or similar,
Mhm.
you're going to become an expert. Every single one of those customer types that you talk to is going to inform the next conversation you have. As they say, a master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried.
Yeah.
Right. So you become a master at that customer type, and each subsequent customer you talk to is going to sense your mastery. And it's only going to get better and better and better. And you'll get to a plateau where there's not much more you can learn about that customer type. And then it's time to move on to the next one. But sort of success will beget success, in that every single encounter only finally hones your skills in that area.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I love the quote too, you either win or you learn. And I also do like what you said there, is if you focus on one particular client, like a dentist every day is cleaning teeth and doing that, right?
Mhm.
Dentist is not also trying to be a doctor and prescribe all kinds of random medicines
Mhm.
throughout the day. And you ask them at the end of the week, so what are you really great at here? They're not gonna know. But a dentist is defined and know what they can do great, what they can improve on, what their customers are saying about them. They're totally in tune with what's going on. I want to move on to the next thing here. So
Yeah.
uh, you talk about customer circumstances. I'm not sure we covered that totally yet.
Okay.
So they're in the, let's say a customer's in the buying stage, maybe online or even in person. How do
Yeah.
customer circumstances factor into the sales process?
All right. Well, if you think about this customer profile we were talking about, that's kind of a vertical line down to this little chunk of information. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, customer circumstances are the things surrounding that chunk of information. So you have to sort of come down and then you have to kind of go out. And maybe it's not a lateral thing, maybe it's a circular thing. My favorite way to describe this is, you're a company and you sell wallets. Okay.
Okay.
And there's a lot of data you can look at as to who's buying wallets. You can look at, your website information. You can look at your shopping cart information and the results of your uh, online ads and keyword optimization and so on. And that's only going to tell you the sort of specific details that bring somebody to the place to buy a wallet. But what you need to take the time to do is circle out from that and ask yourself, why does somebody buy a wallet? Okay, it's November, early December. Sure, people are buying wallets as holiday gifts. Year round, yeah, people's wallets wear out and they go and they buy a new one because the old one wore out. But people also need to buy wallets after their wallet has been lost or stolen. And that lost or stolen wallet could be the result of a car break-in, a mugging, some other kind of assault. It could be a house fire. It could be some kind of domestic situation where someone else is trying to sort of take control of an individual's finances against their will. And in those situations, let's just take car break-in, okay? You left your wallet in your car, you come out to your car, you find your window's broken, and your wallet's gone. Okay, so yeah, you're buying a wallet, but that's one of 20 things you've got to deal with as a result of this scenario, right? A, you got to deal with the broken window. B, you got to deal with whatever else was stolen from your car. C, you got to talk to the insurance company, get your window fixed. If you're living in Buffalo, you got to get it fixed quickly. And now in the loss of the wallet, you've got a license that's now gone, an insurance card, 3 credit cards, your debit card, all the things that go into that wallet, not to mention, you know, that one picture of your grandmother that you carried with you that now can't be replaced. So you were talking about one of 30 steps within the context of a much larger situation. And as a wallet manufacturer or distributor or retailer, if you can be cognizant of the potential that some percentage of your customers are in that sort of traumatic situation, you will go a long way to putting that customer's mind at ease. So it could be something as simple as highlighting security measures of a particular model of wallet and saying, you know, there's a hidden pocket in the back, or that it's, you know, it's small enough to carry in your pocket so you don't have to leave it in your purse. Anything you can say to even softly recognize the fact that your potential customer might be in the middle of a bad situation. They don't necessarily, they're not getting hit over the head with it, but like, this wallet company cares. This wallet company seems to sort of understand where I'm at. And it's a, you know, it's a very narrow, very specific example, but
I think it's a good one though.
But everyone should, and it's kind of a fun exercise, right? Take these customer personas or profiles, sit in a room with all the smart people and put it up on the whiteboard and say, okay, what are all the circumstances surrounding why? And, you know, some of them will be outrageous and some of them will be edge cases that won't matter. And you might not learn anything, but chances are you're going to learn something, and that's going to better inform everything you do in communicating with that customer at every level.
Yeah. Back to storytelling again. Right. And
I mean, what's the story behind the need for the wallet? You know, it could be as simple as, oh, my fat ass has been sitting on it too long. I finally wore a hole in it and need a new one. Great. That person's not going to care about that extra soft stuff you're putting in the pitch. But some gotta, you know, think about the domestic situation where somebody's trying to control someone else's finances. They're probably dealing with custody issues and housing issues and access issues. I mean, that's a lot. The purchase of the wallet is so little. But if you can, one tiny little piece of you can put their mind at ease for even just a moment, they're going to remember that.
Yeah. I have the dad wallet that's like this thick, you know.
George Costanza?
Yeah, I get that. And I literally, my chiropractor this is maybe a year and a half ago, took, and it was the first time, she's phenomenal. First time that anyone ever took an x-ray to see what the heck is going on, instead of just doing an adjustment first and then seeing my reaction to that adjustment. They noticed that my alignment was off about an inch. And the hip that was up in the air was the hip that I sit a lot, either at work, in the office, in my car commuting, whatever, all day long. Like whenever I'm not standing, I was leaning at this. So I don't I don't sit on my wallet anymore. And it's really helped me out.
I had the same situation. I bought a new car 2 years ago. Yeah. And it had stiffer seats. And all of a sudden my back was hurting. And I sort of I didn't go so far as to go to a chiropractor, but I did the sort of the math. And now I have this little thin wallet.
Do that?
I carry in my front pocket. And I realized I did not need to be carrying my, New York State boat safety card from 6 years ago. That can be left in a drawer and pulled out when needed.
Exactly. So the wallet is a great example because we're talking about big picture, and it's just, I like using everyday things, and the wallet's a little bit different. It's not the first thing that I think most would think about. So it's a good example. But I have it written down here, talking about storytelling,
Yeah.
big picture versus one-to-one ratio of like, you talk about the break-in customer, right? So they have a very specific need for that wallet.
Yep.
Big picture is you want to make sure they understand of the why of the company and
Sure.
how, when they purchase it, how it makes them feel, the whole thing. How do you make sure you're still focused here, but all of a sudden your whole campaign is now about wallet being stolen and car break-ins? Because 95% of the other clients or more
Right.
are kind of like, what does this company keep talking about car break-ins?
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't talk about car break-ins.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's the
Right. No, no,
question.
no. No, but I hear you.
Yeah.
You would allude to difficult situations.
Hmm.
You would allude to recognizing that there are a lot of different circumstances that bring people to the wallet buying space. And
Cool.
when people hear that, they want to hear the thing that relates to them. Okay. They really do. You don't have to trick them. People want to hear what they want to hear. They want to believe that their truth is universal. They want
Mhm.
to believe that their situation is like everybody else's situation, even if it isn't. So if you speak in generalities to, we recognize that, everybody needs a wallet, and sometimes it wears out, and sometimes you're in a more of a panic situation to replace it. That's all I
Mhm.
need to say. Panic situation covers the 6 different things we just talked about.
Perfect.
But that company now gets you, right?
Mhm.
The person who's not in a panic situation says, oh, thank God I'm not in a panic situation, and moves on, doesn't care. And says, oh, yeah, great. This is a great wallet. I'm going to buy it for my sister for Christmas. Looks like it's going to be a good fit. But the person who is in a short time frame situation or has an immediate need,
Yeah.
um, and you could say things like, for people who need our product immediately, we offer, $5 overnight shipping,
Mhm.
as opposed to, 25 or whatever.
Yeah.
And if a company recognizes that 20% of their customers need it tomorrow, and they figure out how to break even on overnight shipping, then they're going to sell a lot more wallets and make money on the
They
product.
just open a
Not
whole new
Right.
door. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, you're talking about adversity in this
Sure.
particular situation, right? It leads me into my next question about how most entrepreneurs do overcome adversity at some point. It's just inevitable. They're gonna
No
you
doubt.
think you're going here, and it's a squiggly line to success, and then success is defined in so many different things. Plus, there's a lot of situations that can kind of knock us off our horse.
Sure.
Talk about, can you share any moments with us where you had to bounce back or persevere through adversity?
Yeah. Um, well, I'm a big fan of the term to fail quickly.
Mhm.
Um, Too many times people get a picture in their head of where something's going, and they keep heading in that direction, even though there is a giant granite mountain in front of them. And they just bam, 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 bam into the mountain until they're out of resources. When in fact, if they turned a couple of degrees to the right, there's maybe a way around the mountain to do something slightly differently. I've had a couple of experiences in my career where that's been the case. I had a product that I invented a few years ago. It was an environmental product. Well, it started out as a fundraising product.
Mhm.
It was a little device that helped remove soup can labels from cans. And our original idea was to pitch it to the elementary schools that collect soup can labels. And,
Mhm.
and this came from my own personal experience, which is I had 4 kids in elementary school at the same time that are collecting soup can labels. And between you and me, they were a pain in the ass to get off. And I didn't want to do it because it was hard, right? So I think if I can make it easier, then we'll sell to PTAs, and the PTAs will sell these as a fundraiser, and we'll sell these little devices all over the country. That was fine until we discovered that the only thing that moves slower than governments are PTAs.
Mhm.
They literally can't make a decision to save their lives. So they all thought it was a great idea, but we couldn't get anybody to execute. At the same time, we sort of stumbled across the idea that when you recycle a steel can, um, the paper gets burned up. It doesn't get recycled. But if you remove it first, then it does. So that product didn't change, but the market did. We shifted from a PTA fundraising focus to an environmental focus, and it made a difference. Um, Another situation I'm in sort of still in the middle of. I established a company about a year and a half ago called Dirty Hands Academy, and we teach
Mhm.
classes to teenagers and functionally drivers of all ages about their cars. Teach them how to change a tire, jumpstart a car, read a check engine light, and then we also have another course that teaches them basically car information so they can be a better informed consumer of car services. So when the person says, your brakes need to be replaced, they can ask a question like, well, how many millimeters are left in my brake pads? As opposed to, I guess I better give you $700 for something I have no idea whether I actually need or not.
Yeah.
And that the goal behind that was to build this empire and have franchises all over the country and, become the mathnasium of car information. Well, didn't turn out that way. We spent some money doing marketing. We've got some good flow of students, but it's going to turn out to be me teaching classes a couple of times a month as more of a hobby. We teach the 4-hour class in person because that's hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
And we've taken the 2-hour class and we're almost done turning it into an online course because that particular course isn't hands-on. It's all information out to the customer. So we're like, we don't need to do this in person. We can sell it to a household on a subscription basis. So the ability to recognize what's not working and be able to sort of set it aside and then go in the direction of things that are working is key to success and key to avoiding failure. Now, the trick in all of this, and we talked about this earlier in terms of focus, is not to go in every direction where there's no resistance. You've got to pick the ones that make the most sense for you. Make note of the ones that, like, hey, well, somebody over here asked me if I could do this. And if you can, great. But if it's not your prime directive, sort of set that aside and say, you know what, I'm not going to do that now. But I'm going to put a sticky note on the board and we're going to revisit that later when it's time to expand it to do something else. In my current business, we're aiming to talk, we mostly are working with, companies that are in the, 15 million and up space that are at least 10 years old. But I had a friend from high school who saw what I was doing and called me, and we talked the other day, and it occurred to me that there may actually be a sort of a personal version of what I'm doing that could just be captured in 4 or 5 hours of time.
Talking about Dirty Hands Academy?
No, this is inside the Best Why.
Right there.
We're aiming to we're working with mostly bigger customers, but I now have an idea for potentially doing a personal version that would look a little bit different.
Sure.
And I'm going to look into it. I'm not necessarily going to do it, but I'm going to look into it. So, I saw something the other day that said, I'm not so concerned about how many times you've been knocked down as I am about how many times you've gotten back up. And we said it earlier about the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. You got to keep going. You've got to have confidence in who you are and what you have to offer. And you've got to be willing to, ignore the haters. I was reading an article this morning about how people get discouraged when they discover they're not the only ones doing what they do. We entrepreneurs have this idea that they, in business plans, and I've taken a couple of business plan courses, and one of the first things they tell you in the competition section is, don't you dare say you have no competition. Right? You do have competition. Even if no one else is doing what you're doing, you're competing for dollars, you're competing for time, you're competing for mind space, right? Yeah. So there's always competition.
Right.
So you've got to be confident in who you are and what you have to offer. And you got to keep going. It's hard sometimes.
I want to make sure we don't just steamroll right past it.
Yeah.
And I want to switch gears, no pun intended. But talk about Dirty Hands Academy. It's dirtyhandsacademy.com.
Correct.
I wanted to say this. I love that you're doing that because it's something that with your own family, you wanted to make sure your kids grew up and had a well-rounded understanding of the world so that you're not sending them off to college. And then after college, they don't know how to change a flat tire. And, I can even say, like, I'm not trying to, pick on my dad or anything, but I didn't have so many of those hands-on educational lessons over the years that
it's something that sort of disappeared over the last 30 years. It used to be something they taught in schools. It used to be something. Cars have gotten, let's be honest, cars are really damn reliable. So they don't break that off. But when they do, you still need to know how to do this kind of stuff. That's one of the things I teach in my classes. Like, look, you're probably not going to change your own tire first. You're going to change somebody else's because you're far more likely to encounter someone with a flat tire than you are to get one. But how better than to exercise that information and helping someone?
Yeah. When you're out with your friends, you're out with your family, whatever, something happens in the pinch and you're just more resourceful. And also you're not getting taken advantage of by the big box stores. It's $700 just to walk in and out of there and sign a sheet of paper. So I think that's awesome. Personally, I feel that should be in every high school. Have a common sense / hands-on. We had tech classes. I don't even know if they do
No,
tech as much.
they called it shop when I was in high school, but
Shop,
yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of shop, but I think it's taken it to the next level of being like a well-rounded person with like have a tool belt that you can.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there are, yeah, people need to be able to hang a picture. They need to be able to balance a checkbook.
Mhm,
They need to be able to boil an egg. You know, it's a
mhm.
lot of this stuff that, I had a roommate in college who came up to me one day and picked up a jar of uh, Orville Redenbacher popcorn I had on my desk, and he said, "What's this?" I said, "Scott, it says popcorn." He goes, "This isn't popcorn." He'd never seen unpopped popcorn.
Like
Uh,
that wasn't microwavable, like that you had to put.
Oh no,
Oh,
this was just in a jar, just
yeah,
popcorn kernels in a jar. But he'd never seen it unpopped before. He'd only ever seen the popped variety at the movie theater.
unreal.
So yeah, you're right. It's it's fun, and what's actually interesting is that where Dirty Hands is probably going to be the most successful is that I'm actually working with a charity here in town and developing a program for sort of free car clinics on Saturday mornings in their parking lot.
Mhm.
One of the biggest issues for the working poor is transportation. People can get a job, but if it isn't your public transportation, then they have to have a car, and it gets very expensive. And preventive maintenance is something they don't have the money for. So, we're going to be doing sort of a car triage clinic, very much like free walk-in medical clinics are for people. We're going to be
Mhm.
doing it for their cars, because if their cars don't pass inspection or they break, that can be a huge cascading effect in taking people from getting by to being homeless or worse.
Wow. Yeah. What you're doing is really great. And I love that we got to shine some light on it here on the show. I know we're running a little bit light on time here. I
Yeah,
have a few more minutes. Do you have a couple more minutes?
yeah, whatever you got to go, let's do it.
'Cause here's what I want to do. I want people to get to know you a little bit more. You talked
Okay.
about a couple of businesses you're involved with and how you can help out larger companies, and it's thebestwhy.com. But how about Steve? Who, talk about how you value time with your family and balance it, make this all make sense.
Yeah.
And what do you do like when you do have a little bit of free time, which is,
Sure.
I know um, our goal is to kind of not have so much white space on our calendar, but
Yeah.
it's important to recharge. So what does that look like for you?
Um, the storytelling piece of my current profession really kind of came out of some personal discovery. I went to a conference, gosh, now it's like 6 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, that, and it's actually some techniques I learned at this conference I'm still using in my company, that basically had you go and review your entire life and document it in using the same techniques that screenwriters and playwrights use, sort of documenting positive and negative turns and using it to create what ultimately is your life theme. And that sort of launched my own personal storytelling and writing effort. I started this blog. It'll be what is it now? 2015. It'd be 5 years ago in 2 weeks. And turns out I had a lot of pent up stories to tell. I wrote uh, 130 blog posts of 1,500 words or more in the first 10 months. I just cranked them out. I just
Yeah.
had so much
It
to
just
say.
came right out of your heart. I mean,
Yeah, well, I sat down with a notebook. I'm like, I tell this story and this story and this story and this story, and then it just came out. It was almost like someone had knocked a block out of a dam. Um, so I like writing and I like telling stories. I'm part of a live storytelling group here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we meet every other week and we do performances 4 or 5 times a year. I
awesome.
really enjoy that. My kids are a little older now. I got 2 in college and 2 in high school, so if I can get any time with them, I like it.
Hmm.
Tends to be uh, in the form of getting involved in what they're doing. We had a situation last summer where my number 3 kid um, had a couple of, we'll call them, vehicular mishaps with his young license, and ended up costing a few $1,000s to sort of sort those things out. And rather than saying, "Hey, go to your minimum wage job at Chick-fil-A and come up with this money," or the opposite, which would be, "Don't worry about it, Mom and I have it covered," we said, "Look, we have this retaining wall that's falling down in the garage, or near the garage, that we need torn down and rebuilt." And he wants to be an engineer, so I said, "You're going to build me a wall." And it turns out, he designed and built some of the wall, and then the summer ended and he had to go back to school. But we worked a lot together, and
That's cool.
we paid his brothers a reasonable hourly wage to help, because it was a pretty big job. And that's the sort of thing I love doing with my kids, is sort of getting together and solving problems and getting stuff done together.
As he becomes an engineer, I guarantee he'll always think back on that time. And I know he was kind of doing it to make up for a situation that wasn't a good one necessarily, but I am positive he's going to reflect back and appreciate the time with you, but what he learned as well.
Yeah, when he brags on it, anytime somebody comes to the house, he's like, "See that wall? I built it."
The strongest one in the whole building right
Yeah,
there.
and then he'll turn to me and say, "Yeah, Dad helped." Like, yeah, okay,
He did
whatever.
a little bit, yeah. I always love to wrap up with this. It goes right back to the mission of my
Sure.
show. The storytelling and messaging here is if you can give one message, and you've given so many, but one to kind of put a bow on this whole thing, leaving my audience to be inspired, to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams, what would that be?
Think about the things in your life about which you are the most proud.
Hmm.
The things that help make you you, and share those with the world.
Yeah.
I heard a statistic a couple weeks ago, and I got to reach out to. I was at a panel, and someone said this, but I got to get the specifics. But it was something along the lines of the top 5 things you're good at
Hmm.
in order makes you one in something like 1.2 million people in the country. Like 1 in 1.2 million have those 5 in that order. So
Wow.
even though, you're one of 70 accountants at an accounting firm,
Yeah.
no one's the same. You have something
Love that.
unique to offer. Get in touch with it, connect with it, be proud of it, and then share it.
Everyone's DNA is a little bit different,
A little
right?
bit different.
Yeah, you got 70 different. It's like a menu, right? You
Right.
can order it, but you can customize it.
Yeah.
Again, it's relationships, it's people. I love that. So if you're listening to this right now and man, you want to do something and you just feel maybe it's already been done, realize that your own way of doing it, and you're going to do the 5 things that you feel you can serve the world and be on purpose.
You're literally better than 1 in a million.
And it's always unique, and you bring value.
And the other thing to keep in mind when you think, oh, someone else is doing the same thing,
Hmm.
you pull up to any busy intersection in any city. There's 4 gas stations. They're all selling gas. There's 4 fast food companies. They're all selling fast food. And there's 4 convenience stores, and they're all selling 99-cent soda. And every single one of them is thriving. So get out there, do your thing. It doesn't matter if it's on some level the same as somebody else's. You're going to do it your way. Also, it's important to recognize that the first guy to do something is not always the successful guy to do something. Ask anyone who worked at Netscape, what it was like to be the first guy. They all work somewhere else now. So, it's okay if someone else started it. Look at what they're doing, put your own stamp on it, and make it yours.
Right. Yeah. You look at the development of this thing in my hand right here called the phone.
Yeah. Where's Nokia now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Man, there's so many good points here, and I'm going to have a hard time cutting this thing down to a promo with a couple highlights here. But I thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate what you're doing. You're taking your own time and highlighting the people you've encountered that can make a difference in the world, and we're all better for it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey guys, I appreciate you hanging out all the way until the end. Steve's knowledge and our conversation on purpose-driven marketing and branding could go on for days. My biggest takeaway this week was Steve's note about not focusing as much on being the first at something, being the first in an industry to develop a new idea. Of course, that would be great, but you can be cutting edge. That's fantastic, but many times the one who designs the first model that takes off is not the longest standing in the industry. Steve points out Netscape and Nokia as examples that have flashed as leaders for a few years, and then they're a distant blur today. And whether it's while COVID-19 has many in a state of paralysis right now, or the economy is booming, think about how you can add value to people, the end user of a product and a service. That is always going to win. How you can better serve, and it doesn't have to be a brand new idea. And that really hit me, as I'm constantly evaluating my progress in business and new ideas to add to the mix or remove from the mix. It was a nice lesson to reflect on. And as I mentioned last week, I'm personally utilizing the quarantine as a time to reset, reflect, and refocus my why. My company, Social Chameleon, we've been planning a shift since before the epidemic, and now it's actually helped me refocus. We have added podcast production as a service. We edit full-length podcasts like the one that you're listening to right now. The audio. We cut the promo for social media, and we also produce the content leading up to each episode launch, the cover image, and social media supporting content. To get more info, you can visit socialchameleon.us, SOCIAL, Chameleon is CHAMELEON.us, and schedule a one-to-one call with myself for more details. I'm wishing you guys all well. Thank you again for tuning in each week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay home. My thoughts and prayers go out to everyone to find peace and not let fear overtake your comfort. I love you guys, and all I ask is a small favor in return of me doing this content for free. After you're done tuning in, leave me a review or share the episode with a friend who you know would appreciate the content. Throw a comment on one of our social media posts. That truly does give me energy. Let's be social on social media, and let's connect. I'm most active on IG, LinkedIn, and Facebook. My handle on Instagram is @MikeDiCiocio. It's MikeDiCioCCIO. Shoot me an invite, and I'll be happy to connect. You can find more info and show notes on my guests at mikedupodcast.com, MIKED uppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You know what to do. Be great and be grateful.